Hi everyone, my name is Jessica McRail and I am recording my Activity Fund Safeguard. So guidelines for spending. The textbook says that funds are only to be used for their intended purpose. So we cannot use the funds for anything else. If we ran out of money somewhere within our system, we still have to make sure that we use them for the intended purpose. And the money should be used for the students that are currently enrolled when the money was raised. And the fundraising for these funds should not interfere with the instruction that is happening. Our state says, and I'm in the state of Kansas, that the benefit should go to those that it has contributed. So the students that raise the money, it should go and help those students that raise the money. We should have it approved by our Board of Education, and safeguards should be in place for the fund. So that means some checks and balances should be happening. My district is Shawnee Mission School District, so we have an accounting manual that makes sure that all of these checks and balances are in place. And that means that for our district that student activity funds require approval. So that's from our board. And building activity funds can contain student and district money, which is different from some other districts. And each fund should have an employee in charge, which is typically our principal at this moment. The fund will be audited annually by our internal auditing. Characteristics of a sound internal control system. So the textbook says there should be reasonableness, timeliness, usage, reality, and commitment. So reasonableness, so the cost should not benefit or exceed the benefit. Timeliness, usage, and effectiveness, so that the fund is meant for its purpose. Reality, that it must be effective. We must have a reason that we're needing these funds, and they should affect some of our students in some shape and form. Commitment, and we should have a top-down system being used. That means the top is approving, and then it trickles on down. For our state, lines of authority should be determined. So that means that the Board of Education, superintendent, district treasurer, principal, and sponsor should all, there should be a line from the top-down approach that the textbook was talking about. And procedures should be in place in writing and safeguards. And my district actually does all of these things. So all funds are subject to audit by our internal auditor. And those are completed annually. And we do have lines of authority. And we do have commitments of having that top-down approach. 3 types of internal control. So the textbook was talking about preventative, detective, and corrective. So preventative is the best because it's the most cost-effective. So we want to prevent any errors that are going to happen within these funds. Detective is if there is an error, we want to make sure that we catch it, right? And corrective is saying that when we find an error, if we find an error, we need to correct it immediately. And the state talks about having board policies that address this. So making sure that your internal system has policies that are saying some of those things of how are you going to prevent some of this from happening. And the superintendent should identify who's in charge of that fund, which is super important. Guidelines for the principal and the bookkeeper are laid out into the accounting manual. So principals, some of their examples of some of their commitments are to appoint a sponsor. That is that person that's going to kind of oversee that activity. And all funds are approved by the principal. So the principal then would identify a bookkeeper in the elementary level that is typically their secretary. And the secretary has the day-to-day activities that are documented in a journal or a ledger, and they complete PO orders. And that's just a few of the things that they do. They have a huge internal list of what is expected on a day-to-day basis. Basic general controls for a school accounting system. So textbook, think about environmental, administrative, and limited access. So environment, we want to model behavior that shows high standards for ethical behavior. We want to make sure that the people that we are putting in charge of these are morally thinking in the right state of mind at all times. And we want to make sure that we're monitoring the people that are having access to these funds. Administrative, again, reviewing all of these things. So that's transactions, ledgers, people who are asking for money. And we want to secure items related to the fund, making sure that we don't have that access to that is not widespread. And we want to limited our access of and changing our passwords frequently, backing up our data, and changing out those people who do have access so that we're not having one person all the time. Our state says all activities should be written down in a statement, which we do. We have internal manual, accounting manual, and policies in place by the Board of Education, which we do, and segregated duties related to the fund. So when we think about our district, we have they are certain duties for each person, the principal, the bookkeeper, and the sponsor, and those people are changed out every once in a while. Following, our district says you should follow the accounting manual to the T, and it is very thorough. There are explicitly written procedures for every part of the fund. So think about cash, receipts, POs, approvals, audits, etc. Controls for cash receipts. So the textbook is saying preparing deposits. Every day we should be depositing and locking up the funds when we cannot make it during the day when we get cash. And making deposits again should be daily, and we should review those deposits that we're making so that we have those checks and balances. We want to provide receipts for anything over $3 and use pre-numbered receipts. The state is telling us that we should have an emphasis on internal control of the fund and processes written down, which my district does, and pre-numbered receipts and monitor the account. My district does all of these things. They say that cash should be kept in a locked location until deposited. Receipts should be made for all money collected and must be on pre-numbered. And we need to make sure that we write them a receipt for within 24 hours and that we have daily deposits happening. Controls for cash disbursement. The textbook says that we should be issuing checks that are pre-numbered and require 2 signatures. That's going to allow for our checks and balances to happen to make sure that we aren't spending our money on something that isn't appropriate. We should be issuing PO orders that are numerical and follow state and district guidelines, and determine the school's true balance by comparing the bank statement to the school statement, which is another checks and balances. The state says the person in charge of the fund should approve the disbursement, potential limit on disbursement, so maybe putting a cap on how much you can give out of the fund at one set time, and pre-numbered checks and monthly financial reports. My district says that all disbursements must be made by check, so that means that we have a paper trail happening. There's 2 signatures required, and you must have a PO of the disbursement, so that way we can have even more paper trail. We record the transaction in a ledger by the bookkeeper, and we must meet board policy when any kind of disbursement happens. Thank you.